computer. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Chrissie Hodges. I'm an advocate for OCD, in particular pure OCD, which just happens to be the name of my memoir, Pure OCD, The Invisible Side of Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. I am a certified peer support specialist working with people worldwide, supporting them as they're working toward recovery in any stage. I also run 8-week groups, and I have an online community that is open to join at any time you're looking for support. We have weekly support groups, weekly peer support, monthly classes, and monthly events. NoCD, NOCD is an app, and inside that app, you can find resources, you can meet other people with OCD, but especially they have exposure response prevention therapy, and they can do this all over the world via telehealth. If you would like to have an assessment with them or sign up for therapy and see if they provide therapy in your area anywhere around the world, go to treatmyocd.com or nocd.com. And thank you for being here. We are going to have part two, if you have watched the first part of myself and Jonny Say. Today we wanted to come in and talk more about real event, maybe even tie in a little false memory stuff. We did a first video and it was really amazing. Got a lot of great feedback. It actually brought to life some of the things that people were confused about with real event. And then there are some things that we just want to elaborate on as kind of a follow-up to that video. So Jonny, just want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and welcome.
Great, thanks, Chrissy. Great to talk to you again. I'm Jonny Say. I'm an OCD therapist based in the UK. I co-direct the Integrative Centre for OCD Therapy. And yeah, I love this topic. I think it's a difficult topic to cover in a short space of time, but we're going to try to do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure to chat with you on and off camera.
Yeah, likewise.
So if you haven't watched the first video, I would highly encourage you to do that. You can find that on my channel. But one of the things that Jonny and I are really passionate about talking about is real event OCD. Now, I'm just going to quickly go through this so you know what we're talking about. So as we know, OCD can manifest in different themes, and real event is one I think that does not get talked about enough, but not talked about enough that it needs to be talked about, which is real event when it comes to something that's happened that's extremely shameful. And a lot of times that can manifest in things like sexual acts when you were a kid. Sometimes we call this child's play, sexual exploration, watching pornography, all harm, things like that, or even things that have happened in your teenage years. And real event, of course, can happen at any point. It can happen in your 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever. But we today in particular want to talk about real event when it comes to things that may have happened to you or that you engaged in when you were a child. And we're really specifically going to focus on sexual acts. What happens with real event is that this is something that has actually happened. And later in life, or even right after that, OCD tends to latch onto that real event. And now all of a sudden, you've got shame with the event, and then you have OCD, and they entangle. And now you are just in a world of shit. Of grief or guilt and shame. And the thing that is really difficult, and Jonny, I've talked about this before, is that sometimes your insight gets really low. And so then it's this, it's almost like being in the spin cycle, and they're both playing off of each other. And even though OCD is involved, you don't even recognize OCD can be involved because you actually have shame and guilt about the event. And so it's important, and I want to say this, it's important to seek professional help from a specialized therapist who can help pull these two things apart, because you've got to get the OCD piece under control to be able to clearly see what's going on with that event and to see what you need to engage in to have some healing around that. We're not here to attest that the real event didn't or did happen, or it was horrible, or it was good. We're not here to do that. We're here to talk about what to do if you are stuck in this cycle. There's also some things that we want to clear up and just give a little bit more information on from the last video that we did. So with that explanation, Jonny, is there anything that you want to add before we dive right in?
I really like what you said about disentangling the OCD, the mental compulsions, the mental review, the analyzing from the actual real event, and then healing the shame and the pain and the grief around the real event. So I really like the way you distinguish those two. And I think, yeah, a big underline of if you are really if you're listening to this and really tangled up with it, that's a sign you need to be working with a therapist who has specialist knowledge of OCD and specifically real event OCD. So that's a big, yeah, a big encouragement to seek that support and find that right therapist that you can work this through with.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start with this. A lot of the scenarios that I encounter with clients, and I'm sure you do too, and a lot of things that people are experiencing are mentally reviewing or having memories of things that have really happened in their childhood or their teenage years. So these are things that, a lot of times we'll call it child's play or, sexual exploration. So many of us have experienced these things when we were little. You don't have the emotional intelligence yet. Maybe you were exposed to sexual content, whether that's porn or sexual language, things like that. Now your brain as a child is starting to explore, maybe starting to act out some of these things that you've seen, some of these things that you've heard, and you're involving other kids. Maybe kids that are younger than you. Maybe you're a teenager and you're involved. Maybe it's family, maybe it's neighbors, cousins, things like that. We all hear the stories of like the cousin pulling his pants down and showing the other cousin his penis, but things can go beyond that. And
Yeah,
so there could be a lot of guilt and shame when mentally reviewing those things, especially if you're having intrusive thoughts about, am I a pedophile? Do I want incest? Things like sexual orientation, OCD, and things like that. So in our last discussion, let's just cut to the chase. In our last
yeah.
discussion, you brought up the scale. I'll let you describe
Mm,
it, the red, yellow, and all that. And this was like kind of on a continuum of where things are bad and whatever. And unfortunately, because of OCD, most
yeah,
people go directly to what's the worst case scenario, and I'm
yes,
that worst case scenario. So I am red and I actually don't have OCD. So
yes,
let's
yes.
talk. Let's clear the air.
Yeah, yeah, the Hackett scale. Yeah, I mean, I raised that. I mean, a lot of people struggling with this type of OCD are doing research and trying to figure out, you know, whether what they did is something that they should feel so much shame around, or whether it's not. And so they'll often find this scale and other bits of information. So, I guess I spoke about it because, well, before I say why I spoke about it, I think with all these things, we can be using them. We can be using talks like this and any bit of information with the goal of trying to confirm that my OCD isn't OCD and it's a real problem, or trying to disconfirm that, the classic compulsion. And I think a lot of people who reached out to us about that, that was very much what was going on, right? It was that goal of like trying to get that certainty and confirm it. So there's a compulsion right away. So anyone listening to this, you've got to get better and better at catching that compulsion firing up and that urge to reassurance seek. And that is the issue. That is the OCD problem. And like Chrissy said at the beginning, until we get that under control, we're going to be stuck in this cycle and stuck in this pain. So anything can be
Just
used that way.
Just to clear up really quick and just to reiterate that point, I think, and what we're talking about is um, not necessarily about the real event happening.
Hmm.
It's more
Hmm.
about hearing that and reflecting and saying, oh my gosh, this is not OCD. And I
Yes.
really am a predator. I really am
Yes.
a deviant. And that's where the anxiety comes in and the need to want to reach out and say, oh my gosh, I think I'm in the red, and that means this
Yeah.
is OCD. So right there, y'all,
Yeah.
that's the fear.
Yes.
That's where the
Exactly.
panic ensues of needing to know if you're in the red, and that will prove or disprove it's OCD. Just wanted to,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And so for anyone wanting to try and prove that through going, am I a red? Um, that's where we really want people to reach out for specialist therapy on real event. Because if you're at the point where you're so tangled up with those fears that you're wanting to reach out to people on the internet to get reassurance, that's the sign we need to be in therapy. You know, you can't be managing this disorder on your own, trying to work on recovery on your own if you are reaching out to professionals. And I did that in the past. We've all done it. You know, lots of people email professionals for reassurance.
I have.
Yeah, I've done it many times. So you know that's the number one, and then you know the recovery will only come if we get to the place where we're not doing those compulsions and not doing those mental compulsions. So we've got to target that and go after that. So you know, don't be frantically trying to go, you know, where am I on this scale? The function of why I raised that scale was because people will find that scale when they're doing research anyway, but also because I wanted to normalize that these behaviors are really common and they're across the spectrum. Because as we said last time, people in real event OCD often you know, experts talking about it often use very vanilla examples of things that aren't very problematic at all. And so I was trying to use that scale to say, look, actually, there's a whole range of these behaviors and they could be across this scale. And so it's not like find where I am on the scale. It's more, you know, if you've grown up not knowing that 50% of kids below 13 will engage in these sorts of behaviors, you know, 13% or more will be doing it with family members. If you don't know things like that, you think your behavior is out of the ordinary and really appalling. So I was trying to sort of show with that scale, actually, no, these are very common things. And, you know, the real event can latch onto any of these sorts of places. It's not about, you know, am I a red? And though, so that means I'm a perpetrator. You know, it's about these are normal behaviors and you're judging your child self with your adult
Yeah.
personality and your adult, you
Yes.
know, life situation. And
Yes.
that is not fair because that is a child. And like you said, you know, there could be all kinds of complexities. There can be exposure to porn. There can be playing out behaviors that other older kids have done to you when you were younger. There can be you know, films that you've seen and conversations you've heard people talking about these things, or you've walked in on your parents having sex, or you know, some kids develop quicker because they have higher testosterone, so they're interested in sex at a younger age, or you know, all kinds of reasons why, you know, you would be intrigued into this area of your life. And you weren't an adult. So it isn't fair to judge that younger self as an adult. Even if you were a teenager and you were a later
Right.
teenager, you know, go meet a 17, 18-year old. They are a child, you
Right.
know.
And I think that's such an important point to make because that's also outside of the scale. That's also something that I get a lot. That I really want to try to normalize for people that are really suffering with the guilt of it is I was an I was older. I
Yeah,
wasn't, 10, 9, 10, 11. I was 15. I was 16. And so
yeah.
I again it's just so important. Y'all, I remember being 16. And I mean, I don't have real event OCD, but the things that I did and the things that I said, and
Mm,
the things that I thought about when I would masturbate or whatever, I
mm.
think now and I just go, oh my God, like there's so much that things can latch on to.
Yeah,
And again, just like you said, it would be easy for me as a 48-year-old woman to judge 16-year-old Chrissie, but I cannot get back in that mindset. I can't
no,
unlearn all the things that I know now and the
yeah,
emotional intelligence. And so it's important to know that that's what you're doing when
yeah.
you're engaging this. And one point I want us to really discuss is this, and y'all, this is going to be pointed, but you know me, I like to just hit it on the nail on the head.
Mm,
Sometimes in engaging in this stuff, you were the person that
mm,
initiated. You were the person that went to someone younger or, a cousin or family member. You were the one that to an animal did something, and so I also want to say that that is, you are not the only one. Okay.
No.
And again, it's important. I know that this is really hard and you're going to be like, I don't deserve self-compassion. It's so important to remember that there are a lot of times there are reasons you did it that you cannot relate to right now. There are
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's
Yes.
important to have self-compassion for the kid that you were or the teenager that you were then, because
Mm.
to punish yourself over and over and over because you were, I don't even want to use the word perpetrator because that's such a harsh word, but like for
Initiator.
the
Yeah.
initiator,
Yeah.
and then on top of that, now you're thinking about the damage you've done to someone else and what if
Hmm.
their mental
Hmm.
health and what must they think about, and then we're going to get into all the stuff about should I go confess, and I don't even deserve a good life. I don't deserve. So I wanted to bring that up and get your
Mm.
feedback from
Mm.
you, Johnny, and just to let you know, if you're listening to this and you are the initiator, you are not alone, okay, at all. And just because you initiated something does not make you a horrible person, a predator, and that you deserve unhappiness. Okay, so hear me when I say that and know you are not the exception. Okay, Johnny.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and if you think 50% of people engaged in these behaviors, then half of those people were the initiators. So that's a huge chunk of people. It's a and I don't think those statistics always capture the full extent because all humans will be exploring this stuff to some degree. So there's actually 100% exploration, and then the 50% of sort of playing these things out more intimately. So yeah, I mean, I think as you were talking, I was thinking about that the healthy guilt concept that we introduced last time. So the unhealthy guilt is, me as a child had complete agency. I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew everything I know as an adult now then, and because of that, that behavior is appalling. It's not quite shame because shame is then we add in the self judgments of I'm bad and those sort of global descriptions of our whole person as being unworthy. But the unhealthy guilt is like that behavior was just appalling and I can't let myself off the hook. Whereas healthy guilt is like, yeah, that behavior now I regret as I look back on it as an adult, knowing what I know now. But I can see the bigger picture actually. Number one, what were adults like with me about sex? Were they talking me through these things? Were they educating me? How openly was this talked about? How, much was this something that I was guided through by a loving and caring and supportive adult, guided through emotionally and in terms of the education around it? Versus was it something that was not talked about and no one went anywhere near and then, and it was shamed. I mean, you just don't even know the first times you walked around as a little kid naked. How was that met? As you were playing with yourself in the bath, how was that met? As you started to explore your sibling's body when that you're in the bath together, how was that met? There are all these micro things that you can't even remember. Were they all met with compassion and understanding and education and helping you learn, about this domain of life? I don't think it probably was, or with most people, it hasn't been. What
Right.
about the bigger picture of the other things we talked about? The exposure to content that we weren't ready to see, and exposure to ideas that we weren't ready for yet, and also just being a kid, and you don't have the same impulse control as you have as an adult, and especially when your hormones are stretching your brain every which way in every direction, you don't have the same capacities you have as an adult now. So the healthy guild is seeing that and probably 100 other factors that could have fed into that. And then we want to also work on that shame component where we're starting to judge ourselves as a bad person, as a global thing. Everything about us is bad. And we want to, I mean, I work it with acceptance and commitment therapy skills for that, and compassion skills to be able to observe those judgment thoughts of I'm bad, to be able to observe them as thoughts and soften their power over time, and then bring in a compassion message instead of actually, no, as a kid making mistakes, every human in this life makes mistakes, has things they have to live with when they've hurt people and they've hurt themselves and they've done different things. Like no one's immune to that. And OCD will make you sort of perfectionistically think your whole future has to be clean and perfect with no contamination from these sorts of events, whereas everyone has things that could be contaminating their future if they, were ruminating and reviewing and going over all the time. So I think there's a lot around that, and a lot more we could say on working on shame. But then the other last thing, and then love to hear your thoughts as well on that. The other part of it is like, well, this hurts because I care about something. Like, the people that are real perpetrators don't feel pain around this stuff because it's not attacking their values. It's not in some way in relationship with what they value in life. So it tells us we care about something. And normally it tells us we care about relationships and other people and, looking after people in this world and being kind and supportive. So what can we learn from, this experience and why it's so painful? And then how does that relate to the person we want to be in the world going forward? I think is a huge piece of how we learn to forgive ourselves.
Mhm. And just to clarify, if you're listening, and when we're saying that perpetrators tend to not care or what that, we're not talking about when you were a kid.
Yes. No, no,
We're
no,
talking
no.
about now because
Yes,
when we
yes.
work again, that's another source of where you can get triggered.
Yeah,
It
because you didn't feel the same way back
correct.
then as you do now. Yeah, yeah. Very
I
good point.
wanted
Very
to
good
do
point.
this when
Yeah.
I was a kid. I felt
Yes,
excited when
yes,
I was a kid.
yes,
I
yes,
wanted to orgasm when I was a kid. So,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
we're what we're talking about with that statement is more of how we're feeling in reflection. When you
Yeah,
were a kid, you're exploring it because it felt good.
yeah, yeah.
You're
And you're
exploring it
being
because
run by your
excitement.
hormones and yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
in full disclosure, like I started masturbating when I was 8, and I did it every single night. I don't know what was
Hmm.
wrong with me. I was just
But
a
no, but
horny
nothing's
little
wrong. Like
kid.
that's normal behavior though. But
And
that's normal behavior. Yeah.
I think back to, now as an adult, and and when I have had different obscure themes, I will remember things that I fantasized about when I was 8, 9, 10, even as a teenager, even sometimes in my 20s. And I just think, oh my goodness, does that mean that my OCD is
Yeah.
true now? Remember, OCD is always looking for the reason why it's not OCD. And you really are whatever that fear is, a deviant,
Mm,
a
mm,
pedophile, that you want incest, that bestiality, whatever that is. So it is interesting
mm.
how all of a
Yeah.
sudden all of these memories can surface.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
just wanted to make that clarification because when you were a
Yes.
kid and you were engaging in child's play or exploration or any of that, you may have wanted to
Yes.
create. Your intention may have been, well, I want, my cousin to take her shirt off and I want to touch her boobs because I saw
Yeah.
that on porn or, somebody did that to
Mm,
me or whatever. And or just out of curiosity.
mm,
So do not
mm,
mix up what
mm.
how you felt about that when you were a kid about how you feel about it now. Again, like Johnny said,
Yes.
absolutely
Yes.
no way we can get back into the bodies of us being a young child or teenager and be able to meet that person where we are at now with what we know. And
Yeah.
just to emphasize, and I did want to say this earlier, like this is such reassurance, but I don't care. And I actually really try to assure clients when they come to me of the fact that you're even worried about this
Mm, mm,
means that you
mm,
do have empathy. Your OCD
mm.
might say that you don't, by the way. It might say
Yeah.
all that, but that's the big difference of having that
Mm,
empathy, having that compassion, having that worry about what happened to the other person, whether it was done
yeah.
to you or whether you were the initiator. And so if we, hook that back to the red zone,
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
a lot of that is what Johnny was talking about in the first video, which is
Yeah.
we're talking about not having any remorse whatsoever. And, having OCD even latch onto it, bringing this stuff up is creating remorse, it's creating fear, it's creating,
Mm,
which is directly going against what he
mm,
was referring to with the red. And then my last point, and then and I definitely want to comment on the healthy and unhealthy guilt and all that. But I wanted to say this
mm,
is, just one more point. Kids, I think, this is so important, is kids and teenagers, because we don't have experience in the world. We're learning everything, we're picking everything up. I mean, think about kids and how they imitate you. If you've ever been around kids, one of the things you do with little babies is you make faces and they imitate you back. They're looking to people, and then they sometimes start looking to iPads and phones and
mm,
pornography and movies. Kids imitate,
yeah.
or they repeat things that have been done to them. And so
Mm,
in it's so important to remember that in child's play and exploration, that is a lot of what we're doing.
mm,
I'll just use this example. I probably used it in the last video, but I think it's so important. You know, I won't out him, but one of my cousins showed me Penthouse when I was like 8 years old. And I remember that feeling of arousal, and I remember this hot flush, and it was exciting, and I had butterflies. And I remember thinking to myself, how can I recreate that feeling? Because that was a
mm,
new feeling to me. Thank goodness
mm,
I didn't go
mm,
after my cousin and try to make out with him. Although
mm,
I probably tried and I just forgot. But anyway, I remember from there, this has always been an embarrassing story for me, but I think it will help. I remember from there going, I've got to get my hands on one of those magazines. Now,
yeah.
was it because I wanted to see naked women? No, I wanted that feeling again, whatever that
Mm,
feeling was that I didn't know. And I remember
mm,
saying something about that magazine and my dad catching me say it. And it
mm,
was like,
mm,
we don't look at Penthouse or something. When I had HOCD or sexual orientation later on, I remember that example and going, oh
mm,
my God, when I was younger, I wanted to look at Penthouse. That must mean I'm gay.
mm,
Then when I dug into it and with my trauma therapist later, it was like, oh, I really wanted to recreate the feeling of being aroused. But as an
mm,
adult, I cannot comprehend that. I do not understand
mm,
it. Now, I know that's a
mm,
minimal example, and you're like, whatever, like I humped my cousin, or my sister or brother.
yeah.
But I want you to look at that example as just and put yourself in the situation of your younger self as imitating, exploring, or whatever of things you can't understand now. And I hope that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good point. And OCD tries to checkmate us. So, it'll often start quite broad on something like POCD. It's sort of all kids and it's like a very anxious form of it, but then it will circle around trying to find like where the risk and the threat is and where the
Yes,
danger is. And it will so often land on the past and go, oh, that's the checkmate. That's the reason why this is true.
the
Look
proof.
at your experience there. You enjoyed it, blah, blah, blah. And so OCD's like it's trying to keep you safe from doing the thing it thinks will get you thrown out of the tribe and abandoned and a miserable life or dying. And so it's trying to find like where is that threat? Okay, it's in your past, and then it latches onto it. And then we get stuck on the past. So people often say, "Oh, it's different to other OCD because it actually happened," but
Yes.
the same mechanism is there. That it's trying to checkmate us into complete avoidance and compulsion, and
And
it's
then,
the same
Johnny,
cycle.
it goes to this is different too because I acted on it.
Yeah, I acted on
That,
it.
right,
Yeah,
that will get you
I
to
liked it. Yeah.
yes.
Mm,
Yes. And so it's so
hmm
important to remember this cycle that Johnny is explaining right now, that all of these things are almost pre-programmed in the OCD pamphlet. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like if you didn't want it and like it, well then you acted on it. Nobody acts on their thoughts, and then oh this really happened so it can't be OCD. It's all pointing to the same thing, y'all. It's all pointing to the same like OCD wants you to doubt that it's OCD, and it wants you to believe that whatever happened back then. And that's where you really need a therapist to help come in and separate those two things so you can have compassion for that younger self and see how OCD is coming in there and just spinning the cycle.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And doubt, remember, doubt, it's the doubting disorder. Um, I've worked with people who have done things in the past that they really regret, including people who have done have done crimes and have had to serve, have served time because of that. And they don't doubt, they don't have that doubting part, they know what they did. So the doubt, like that's the thing to go after, and the doubt is what's driving the compulsions and driving all the mental review and the rumination and analysis and self-reassurance and blah blah blah, all the others. So that's the thing to go after, the doubt that and you wouldn't be listening to this video if you don't have doubt, you
Right.
know
Yeah. So, and then maybe, just for time's sake, we want to emphasize, and I just want to go to that one point that you just made, with the healthy guilt and the healthy, or healthy guilt and unhealthy guilt. You may be saying to yourself, well, I am just like a criminal because I know what I did and I was the one that initiated it. And this could be, looked at as a crime, or I would lose like Jonny said, like, I'm going to lose everything, whatever, whatever. Look, y'all, you can, you could have done something that was wrong in your eyes. No human being walks this earth and doesn't do things that were wrong. And at the time, maybe even intentional, right? But what we're talking about is this, A, if you're not seeking help because you're afraid that you need to turn yourself in, that is the moment you need to seek help, because it like, you didn't do anything that you need to turn yourself in, first of all. And second of all, that's where you do need some assurance, because when you're sitting here spinning in your head this incident that happened so long ago gets so big and so big and so big, and it takes over everything, and you start to view the world and the way the world views you through the eyes of this horrid person that deserves nothing. I am telling you, that is not true. And I know your brain is going, Chrissy, you just don't know what I've done. Well, I cannot tell you how many people say, I'm going to tell you what I've done. And I literally am like bracing myself for something awful. And it's something that I hear over and over and over and over, because child's play, child exploration, things that as adults we would deem as like, oh, we're not going to do that. We shouldn't do that, even if it felt like coercion, right? That is a normal thing that people do. And you're here, like Jonny said, because you feel guilt and you feel like it was wrong and you feel like this is something you should be punished for. But I'm telling you, it's not. And that was a lot of
Mm,
reassurance. But
mm,
if you did do something that was wrong, and maybe the person even thought it was wrong, it's okay to feel guilt. It's
mm,
okay to feel shame. And that is healthy. We all feel that. But when that
mm,
guilt has taken over your entire life to where you don't even think that you should laugh, that you should even be able to smile, that is not normal. And that is a
mm,
good distinction to make of people that, actually do really horrible things. That's the distinction. What happens with OCD is it takes over to the point where you think to yourself, I shouldn't even be able to let the sun shine on my face. I should be punished for life. And self-punishment is a compulsion. I just wanted to
mm,
get that out there because I want you to know that I have empathy for you and compassion, and I love you. Like, all
mm,
these people are like,
yeah,
"You love me?" No, but I do.
uh,
It's
yeah,
so important to know that you are not alone, and that what has happened to you or what you think you've done or what you did do is not supposed to define the rest of your life. So
mm-hmm,
please
mm-hmm,
don't let it.
mm-hmm,
My plea.
mm-hmm,
And I'm sorry I got a little passionate, but like, this is This
Yeah,
topic is so
completely.
important to me.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it makes me think of shame. Shame is, this negative evaluation of our entire self that leads to this desire to hide and withdraw. And I
Yes.
think that's the important part. Whereas guilt leads to action, to repair. So the research on guilt and shame, guilt is very healthy in relationships. It can have a lot of like outcomes that are positive for life goals and relationships, whereas shame doesn't, because it gets us to hide and withdraw. And so that's where we've got to try and move this from shame to guilt. And then we can go and start doing good in the world, because if you're stuck in shame, you're going to be withdrawing, isolated. You're not going to be out there connecting. You're robbing the world of all the love and compassion and connection you could be putting out there. And I think that's sometimes a route into it. Sometimes people aren't ready to forgive themselves, but they can see, well, if I keep following this pattern, actually, I can't be there for family. I can't be there for friends. I can't, do good in this world. So maybe that's my sort of way into this, to start to, what can I learn from why this is so painful to think about? Okay, it's because I care about people and living a good life, right? Let's start to do that for other people at first. And then over time, healing in relationship, healing through ERP, through developing our skills with our mind, we might be able to start to go, well, actually, I'm just a fallible human like anyone else, and maybe I made a mistake, but that doesn't dictate my whole life, and I wouldn't say that dictated anyone else's whole life, and I deserve happiness and love and joy and connection as well. So I think sometimes you can open it up a little bit by thinking the function of this pattern is to get me to withdraw and hide and be submissive. Shame has that function. If you think about the primates with shame, they sort of become very submissive and sort of hidden to protect themselves from the dominant ones. But we want to kind of open up and go, no, I want to put these values into action for others, at least to begin with, and then let's see if I can extend it to myself as well over time.
And I also want to emphasize that this will take a while. This
Yeah.
takes time, and it takes time, with anything, not just with real event. As we all know, OCD is this disorder just does not lend to self-compassion. And I will say that, I'm going to go out on a limb, real event is a difficult theme because there's so many layers of stuff and there's real things that happened. And so I just want you to even extend your brain a second to think, you know what, maybe I deserve a little self-compassion. Just a
Mm,
little. And if you can't give it to yourself, reach out to me and I will shower it all over you. Not in a
definitely.
reassurance way, but you need
Yeah.
that. Because when
Yeah. Yeah.
beat yourself down so much for something that happened so long ago, you need someone to tell you that you're okay and that
Yeah.
this is normal and that that so many people engage in this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
any final words, Johnny, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, exactly like you said, I think healing through connection, through relationship, through community is a big part of this. And exactly like you're saying. And yeah, we know in OCD, you don't want reassurance. Reassurance is a compulsion, but that's the pathological reassurance that is over and over again with a
Yes.
sense of urgency and that I need it again. And if anyone's catching that in themselves right now as they listen to that, that's the one to resist. But an actual assurance and
Yes.
normalizing and validating that lands and helps you make changes in your life that reflect ERP and reclaiming your life. That's a very different thing.
Right.
And that's what Chrissy's trying to offer people here today is this does not dictate you. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of a good life. And we can all feel stuck with this, but reach out and get help.
Yeah. And I often tell people, and I often tell myself this, when I struggle with memories and I struggle with stuff, is that memory may always bring up these feelings. You may
Hmm.
always associate that memory with guilt and shame. Right now, you're so entrenched in believing that you deserve punishment and you deserve. That's why it's so overwhelming. And so, starting to work with someone, a therapist, who, by the way, is going to completely understand what you're going through, um,
Yeah.
starting to work that and just chipping away, I'm telling you, the sun can come in. And, even if down the line you remember that and you have those feelings, that you'll be able to just connect with that child self, just like Jonny said, and say, you know what, that was a mistake. And if I could go back, I would change it and I regret it. But now I'm living this life and I'm going to do the best I can to love those around me because I'm a good person that deserves love and happiness. And
Exactly.
you are that person. Do not sit here after this video and say that you're an exception. I refuse to believe that.
Mm. Yeah.
And so I just want to say that I have a community waiting for you that you belong in. You don't have to share what has happened, but lots of people do share those things. And so even hearing other people's stories may help to break down some of those barriers. So I will have an app very soon as well. And so I'll be advertising that soon, but you can go to chrissyhodgescommunity.com to join, or you can go to chrissyhodges.com if you just want to talk one-on-one with me, or join one of my groups. And again, for therapy, but through an OCD, go to treatmyocd.com. Jonny, always a pleasure. You are one of my
Mm.
favorite people in the world, and I don't just say that lightly. And we are so lucky in this community to have you and the compassion and love that you bring to people that are just navigating some of these really, really tough things with OCD. So thank you, and thank you for being my friend.
Thank you for being my friend. And I get it. I've been there. I've been in that pit of pain. So, like Marshall Linehan said, when you've been in hell, you just want to go down and try and bring other people out of it. So, it's that.
Love Marsha Linehan. She's amazing.
She's awesome. She's awesome.
Jonny, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, so Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I do a lot on my Jonny Say YouTube channel, Jonny Say Therapy YouTube channel, and Jonny Say Therapy on those other platforms. And then the Integrative Center for OCD .co.uk for our OCD center. And we have a team of about 15 therapists, and everyone's well experienced in all these sort of complex versions of OCD. So yeah, reach out. I run groups there as well, and yeah, feel free to reach out, and yeah, I'd love to hear from people.
All right. Well, and we may have to do another follow-up, and if we do, it will be fun. So
Yeah,
stay tuned.
definitely.
But thank you everybody for listening. I hope this was helpful. I know that there were a lot of things that were talked about that were probably triggering and that your mind may also be racing. But remember, that is part of learning about all of the stuff with OCD. And like Jonny said, try to unhook from that need to reassurance, to get reassurance, to reach out and get reassurance from people that what you did or didn't is bad or good. Reach out for support, meaning having someone walk alongside you while you navigate this and whatever the next steps are for you to work toward recovery because you deserve it. Please don't sit and spin in this for years and years and years. The world deserves you and they deserve love from you because I know that you can bring it to them. So, till next time, thank you for being here.